Welcome to the scorching arena of valor and the crucible of courage. This is the Forged in the Fires podcast with Fireman Rob. Here, in the inferno of life's greatest challenges, heroes are shaped and legends are born. Every episode is a torchlight of wisdom, casting a glow on the paths walked by those who've braved the flames and emerged stronger. In this furnace of fortitude, we'll explore tales of resilience, bravery, and the unyielding human spirit. Each guest brings their own spark of insight, lighting up the darkness and guiding us through the smoke of adversity. With Fireman Rob at the helm, prepared to delve into conversations that smolder with significance and stories that kindle the soul. It's not just a podcast, it's a beacon for all who seek to rise from the ashes and glow with purpose. So stoke the fires of your curiosity and ready your heart for tales of triumph and transformation. The flames are roaring. The stage is ablaze. Welcome to the Forged in the Fires podcast. Let the journey begin.
All right, welcome back to Forged in the Fires podcast. I'm your host, Fireman Rob. Today's guest. I've got two guests today. This is a unique one. I love it. This is going to be this is awesome because being able to tell somebody's story and then having a story are two of the most powerful things that you can have in this world, because that will impact lives, that will save lives, that will make days better. Let's put it that way. I just want to get into this because it's so important. Otjen and Dan Steffensen, thank you so much for joining me today. This is going to be fun.
Thanks for Rob.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm going to give the kind of the backstory of this and see. So AJ, you are an amazing authher.
Wow!
And
wow! Thank you.
I'm just going to put it out there. Why not just put it out there, right? An amazing author and a great storyteller. And you had the honor of being able to tell Dan's story. I want to start with you, AJ.
Yes. Yes, an honor. Yes.
I want to start with you, AJ. What brought you to being able to write these stories? What brought you to being that storyteller? Because that's a huge part of this.
Let's see. Well, my background is marketing and advertising, and so you have to try to bring some emotion and drama to good advertising. So I have searched for that most of my career. And then I was telling stories about the Crow tribe in Montana with some of my students, and I've been doing that for a while. I'm in my office. I'm on campus. I'm a professor, so I left the corporate world, and now I'm a professor. So I've been telling stories with my students about the Upsalaka Crow, and Dan read one of those books, and we met on an ad campaign about promoting personal protective equipment after he had been burned. And he was the star of the campaign because he was saying, please buy these calendars so we can raise money to, give everybody protective equiment.
Wait, were these the firefighter calendars that we're used to, Dan? Were you in a Speedo?
No, I told my students no beefcake. The firefighters had taken beautiful photographs of fires.
Oh, perfect.
So I told them to be beefcake. But the campaign itself was actually very good, very dramatic. And then he was the voiceover, and at the end came up and said, please buy these calendars. And so that's where we met. And he had read one of my books, and he said, would you write my story? And I was a little bit taken back because I had never written a nonfiction novel before, and I was not really a narrative writer of anything more than 1,000 words. I did children's books, and I had a column in the newspaper. So I thought I was daunted by the prospect. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
But I felt like, how do you say no to this man? And so it took 2.5 years, and I had to up my skills because it was very important. And so that's how it began.
I love that. And now we go to the man behind the story. Mm-hmm. Dan, what drew you to being a firefighter? Because there's a lot of different people that have different stories of what draws them to be in that career, because it's not an easy career. What drew you to it?
I wanted to be a firefighter when I was your son's age.
Oh, that's awesome.
But it was a different time, Rob, as you well know. It was the 70s. There were no jobs to be had.
Right.
So I grew up and went along my life. But one of the most important factors had to be Engine Company 82. Dennis book. And I read that and just went, holy crap, I need to be a part of this. And I held on to that dream. I went into business. I had a pretty successful business career. I pretty much retired, moved back home to Montana. And one day somebody came up to me and said, "You like to volunteer? Why don't you be a firefighter?" I said, "Oh, crap, yes." And no, it was not a paid department.
Yeah.
But I got everything out of it that I had hoped. Everything I had hoped. And maybe a little bit more.
And what was that draw? Because I don't think a lot of people understand when you volunteer like that. You know, the risks that come along with it, the risk versus reward, really, that come along with it. What does it take in your mind to go, yes, I want to be part of something bigger than myself?
As you just said, risk versus reward. I think the rewards I got far exceeded the risks I took. Yes, I took a few. Yes, I did some really dumb things, and survived all but one of them.
Yeah.
It is the best thing I have ever done. End of discussion.
I love that. And then AJ, when you started this conversation with Dan about this, this chronicle of this extraordinary journey.
Yeah.
What was it that started the conversation? Because when you look at a book, you want to have impact. And what was it that when you're looking at this journey and looking at the story, what was it that started that, like, in essence, that flame to continue?
Well, at first it was hard because Dan wanted it to be a fire book, and I knew nothing about fire, so I had to do a lot of research. And he taught me a lot, and then the fire and all the other firemen at the firehouse taught me a lot. And there's so much to learn about it in Montana, especially. And then the weather, and then I had to learn. And I first started to try to make a story out of his actual burn incident. You know, there was the storm was a character, the radio frequency was a character, the engine was a character, but I was struggling with making it more of a story than an academic story, because I am an academic. I'm used to writing as an academic.
Right.
I thought, Dan, this is really boring. I mean, I know the fire is exciting, but this is coming across as an academic.
Can't feel the heat, Dan.
Yeah. I said, and then I said, this really isn't a fire story. It's a human story. And I've got to find the emotion here. But Dan doesn't share his emotions very well, like most firefighters probably.
Shocking.
And then I started talking to all the people in Red Lodge, and I found out that whole summer in Red Lodge was just a nightmare. There were 3 other tragedies so they called it the summer of hell. And that's why it was so important for Dan to live, for Dan to come home, because the town was suffering that summer. They had a huge fire that came so close to town, it could have burned down the town. They had a college graduate that was lost in the woods in the Beartooth Mountains, and so search and rescue was out looking for them all summer. And then another firefighter had fallen on a skateboard accident and was on life support and ended up dying. So the town it was just a horrible, sad summer for the town. And they were desperate for Dan, who was down in Utah in a coma because of his burns. They couldn't have taken it if Dan had not come home to them. And I realized how important he was to the town and how much they needed him to come home. And that's what gave me the spark to realize this was such an emotional human drama for so many people, including his family, including the town, including all the firefighters. And then I had the story. And that's what gave me that's when I realized it was so important to get it right and capture the love and try to get that on the page. Yeah.
That's so powerful because I think you hit it on the head. Firemen we're terrible at our emotions, telling our emotions. We're terrible. Right. We're great. We always say, don't let the truth get in the way of a good story. But in this case, the truth was the great story.
Yes, and it's a truthful book. I think Dan would admit to that. It was not a fun. People asked if it was fun to work together and tell the story, and we both say no. It was not fun. It was not. The 2.5 years was not fun.
Yeah,
but it is a very truthful book, I believe. I mean, I sometimes I'd call Dan. I'd say, okay, I've written something that's not very pleasant. It's pretty harsh. You need to read it before you see what I'm about to write, what I'm about to put in the book. And he would read it, and we would both be crying. I mean, and he'd say, well, it's the truth, isn't it? I'd say, yeah. And so that's what's in the book.
I never cried. Don't let her tell you that crap.
Bullshit, Dan. Dan, I want you to take me back to when you started this process. So we'll get into, here's the thing is I don't want you to tell the story because I want people to read the book.
Oh,
the biggest thing that I want to do is I want you to take me back to when you had to start this process of writing this book, of having to relive those moments and having to recount things that maybe you didn't want to remember or tell about. What was that process like? Because I think that's almost like going through therapy.
Interestingly enough, I was going through therapy at that time.
There you go.
which is something I had fought my whole life.
Yeah.
But I had to tell this story. Richard Bach talks about his alter ego coming up and grabbed him by the neck and said, "You have to write this story. Illusions has to be written." Yeah. And that's how I felt. It had to be written. And I found out very quickly I have no talent in that regard. And that's when I found AJ and off we went. Rob, you know as well as I do, I'm going to relive those thoughts anyway. Mm-hmm. Let's bring a positive spin to those thoughts. And I think that's what we did with the book.
How many times when you're going through those thoughts, did you start to reposition those in your mind? Did that happen like daily, or was it kind of one of those things where you tell the story and you go, gosh, I never thought of this moment or never thought of this thing?
I can remember every single moment from the time we left the station.
Serious.
Until I got burnt.
Wow.
And I can remember everything from the time I left the scene to the hospital. In the hospital, I can remember all of that until they intubated me and obviously put me out. So those thoughts have never gone away. Mm-hmm. They never will go away. So I've tried to embrace them and make them part of me. And the good part of me, not the bad part of me. Make them the good part of me.
I love that. How long did that take you to start to think of that, of being the good part of you? Because I think that's something that all of us struggle with.
It absolutely is. And I had issues with that prior to getting burned with some of the calls that we had been on. But I can spin it pretty quick.
Yeah.
I am a pretty happy guy. Always have. And I try to return back to that guy when things get a little dark.
Yeah, I love that. AJ, what did you see in Dan when you maybe had a dark story? Because it's always interesting. It's always interesting another person's perspective of maybe like you've never went through that. But when he went into those dark stories, what did you see the difference? Did you see the difference in Dan as he started to tell more and more?
Yeah, I mean, when I first got to know him, everybody used one word for him, and that was tough. Dan's tough. And so the more I got to know him, I saw the vulnerable side of him, which he does not like to admit to.
That's all right, though.
Right.
That's even tougher. That's even tougher. Yeah. Let me tell you that. That's even tougher.
So So say the question again. What am I? Yeah.
So when he went into some of those dark moments, those dark stories, as you guys progress, it's 2.5 years. That's two years of like almost going through those emotions again.
Right.
Did you start to see a difference of those stories? Like, did they start to become like more positive? Was there more like clarity on both of your sides as to what the ultimate goal of that was?
The ultimate goal of telling the story, or the goal of recovery?
Ultimate goal of telling the story.
I think we were trying to have a happy ending, because that I would say yes, we were trying to find the happy ending, and I'm not sure there was when we were in the middle when we were in the middle of telling the story, we weren't quite sure what the happy ending was, because he had
Right.
yet to get back on the fire line when we started the book. And I remember getting a text from him one time. It said 4310. And I went, what's 4310? And it was the time of his pack test. He was not supposed to recover and get back on the fire line for 3 years. And 2 years later, he was passing his pack test. And for fire people, that means 3 miles, 45 pounds, 45 minutes. And he said 4310. And I'm like, what? So 2 years out from his burn, and we probably should tell everybody it was 60% of his body, 3rd-degree burns.
Jeez.
And he's 65 years old, so he when he got to Utah, the honor guard was standing over him. They were going to stand there until he died, but he never died. And that was, everybody thought he was going to die within 24 hours. So the fact that the interesting thing was he still had to go back the next day to Utah for another skin graft. So how do you describe your condition when you did the pack test, Dan?
Bleeding like a pig.
Yeah. So he still had wounds that he was hiding with bandages as he did the pack test. So we weren't sure what the happy ending was going to be to the book, because he was still trying to get back on the fire line. And so that was all happening as I was doing all the other research on the book. And I went with him to his last skin graft, because I wanted to meet the doctors and see the hospital and meet the honor guard and and understand what had happened to him in Utah, so I could write that part of the book. And that really opened my eyes. And the other thing, he had complained about what it was like being in Utah, and he was the worst patient and the meanest patient. Well, you get there, and then they all loved him. They all just loved him. And so then you start to see a different side of him when you see how, I already knew that the town of Red Lodge had loved him. Now I realize that all of the doctors and nurses in Utah loved him as well. So that's the other side you get to see, knowing that how vulnerable he is on the inside. They don't see that part of him. He doesn't show that part. Yeah. So,
Dan, how does it feel to be able to have that kind of impact on other people from what you did? Not what you said, but what you did. How does that feel to you at the end of the day? Because that's a legacy right there that you're leaving. And it's generational.
And it is generational. I mean, I have friends from age 20s to age 80s that helped me through this.
That's awesome.
It's important to me to give back for anything that I have received. And probably more important to give back for those that didn't give me what I needed.
Yeah.
And hope that I can help them to become someone helpful and special.
Yeah. I think the funny thing that I always say to people is the greatest gift you'll ever give, you'll never know about. And I think this book that you wrote, AJ, and the story that you have so vulnerably given, Dan, is one of those things. What is that mindset that you want to give people, Dan, from this story that they can take away and utilize in their lives?
Well, the easy answer is don't give up.
Yeah.
But I think it goes much farther than that. Don't give up on being who you are. And even if I've been an ass, and there are many that will tell you I am, and
Yes.
but I love those people. So don't change who you are to fit the situation. Fit the situation to fit who you are. And that's what I strove to do. I wanted to get back to firefighting. It's all I loved. It's all I had left. I had to get back.
I love that. AJ, what was the impact that you wanted to have by telling this story?
That's a good question. I wanted to get it right, and I wanted to, I had wanted to raise my narrative storytelling skill level to all the people that I interviewed, maybe 50 people, and there were burn survivors, there were the doctors, there were the firefighters, there was the community, and the more I talked to people, the more I was, feeling really pressured to do a good job. And Dan didn't help, because when I got this award from the Library of Congress, and I sent it to Dan, and he told everybody that I was now an Library of Congress award winner. And I went, don't tell everybody, because now you set the standards even higher for me. Oh my God, how am I going to live up to this? And so I guess I was experiencing so much love, and Dan says that firefighting is the best thing he's ever done. I think the last 2.5 years, now almost 3 years, has been really an important part of my life. And so just trying to, there's so much emotion, so much love that's gone on, that if I could just capture that love and get it on the page, that was my goal. And enough people have told me that we did that. Dan lived Dan always says he lived it, I wrote it. And I'm thinking that we did the best job we could to somebody said, you memorialized the story, and thank you for that. And other people have said, I've had friends say, every time I see a fire engine go by, I have a much deeper appreciation for those people. And I think that's a good thing. And I've had burn survivors tell me that, it's a really good burn book. So I'm glad about that. So I'm very pleased with the response from the people that were very important to me in the story. So that's the most important thing.
Don't kid yourself, Rob. It was no damn fun.
No, it was no fun to work together. It was not.
I love it, but if it was easy, everybody would do it. That's the greatest statement of time, because so many people don't do this. One, Dan tell a story because it's you being vulnerable. It's you living something that sucked. And then AJ reaching outside of your comfort zone to find something new. If that was easy, there would be a lot more books on this, but there isn't. And that's what's beautiful about this. Dan, I want to find out from you, what does it mean to have this legacy? I know we had talked about it, but I want to find out from you, like, what is this legacy that you want to transfer on to people besides just the, don't give up? What is this legacy that you want to transfer on to people from Dan?
I've mentored a lot of new firefighters as they came into our department, and firefighters in other places. But do what you love. Do what you love. I spent 30 years in business, and I hated every minute of it. Every minute of it.
Yeah.
I did this for 9 years, and it went so fast. How did it go so fast? You know that.
Oh, yeah.
Hey. So, do what you love. Do it well, and the rest will take care of itself.
I love that. And AJ, when people are looking at writing stories like Dan's and writing these things, what would you say to those individuals who are nervous to write such powerful stories and tell that legacy? What would you say to those individuals that are writers or even like individuals with stories like Dan's? What would you say to them to be able to help them to push forward, because those stories are needed?
I've had kids, and I've met with students, little kids, big kids, say, is writing easy? No, writing is not easy. Writing is hard. That's my first comment. I think you have to fall in love with your subject matter. Yeah. I really do. You have to fall in love with the story. You have to fall in love with your subject because you're going to spend so much time with it. You have to, you wake up in the morning thinking about it. And I would go, I have some acreage, I have some dogs. I would go for walks with my dogs and try to imagine the scene, because even though it's nonfiction, it's a narrative nonfiction. So I would have to throw a bunch of interviews together and imagine a scene of what had happened. And that was, there's creative license in that. And I would go for walks in my woods with my dogs and try to imagine, how did this unfold? How did this story really unfold? And so it would come to me. It would just come to me, and I would get back and type it. And if I hadn't had such an emotional connection with all the people involved, Dan's family, there's a scene in the hospital where his family arrives, and they had been estranged from each other. And I imagined how that had happened. Because I had interviewed them all, and they didn't tell me how it happened, but I imagined how it happened. And I talked to his brother afterwards, and his brother said, "God, you nailed that scene. How did you figure that out?" And I went, well, I just sort of, by talking to you all, I just sort of figured out that's how you would have, that's what you would have said to each other when you all showed up in the hospital. I just sort of imagined that. He said, "Well, that's exactly what happened." And I went, "Well, good. I'm glad I got that right." So
I love it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I want to make sure that everybody goes. You can find this book on Amazon. It's Burned Over: The Survival of Montana Firefighter Dan Steffensen. This is one of those books that you need to get. You need to read. Well written, wonderful story.
Thank you so much.
So powerful in that respect. I can't let you guys go yet because I've got a question for you, each of you.
It's Audible, Kindle, and in print.
Oh, it's everything.
Yeah.
So, I like it. And who does the audiobook?
Andy Pearson. He does a great job. And there's a sample of the Audible. It's like 50 seconds, and it is of the fire. So it's of poor Dan getting burned. That's the sample. That's a 50-second sample. So
that is perfect. Well, make sure you go in and do that. Now, here's the question for both of you. I'm going to go with Dan first. Dan, if you could sit at a firehouse table, and so in other words, no questions off the table, with three individuals, they could be deceased or alive, who are these three people going to be?
Ooh. Those are kind of easy for me. Dennis Smith.
Okay.
Pretty much an easy one for me. Richard Bach, another easy one for me. And Tyler Ray. Tyler Ray, mentor coming up.
I love it. I
never time with him.
I love it. AJ, what do you got? Who are the three people?
My grandfather, who died when I was very young, he was a senator from Oklahoma, and he was supposedly a brilliant man, and I would love to
that'd be awesome.
Get to know him. Because I feel people say I'm a lot like him, and I'd like to know. Oh, not that I'm brilliant, but we had the same philosophy on life. Let me think.
It's always a hard one.
Probably the two men that I've spent the most time with in the last 2.5 years, my muses, which is Dan, and then another man named Kevin Red Star. He's an artist, and I've done 2 books with him. So Dan and Kevin Red Star, probably.
I love it. That's a good firehouse coffee table right there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, it's been such an honor. Make sure you go and buy the book, Burned Over, AJ and Dan. It has been such an honor and a pleasure to have you on today.
Well, thank you. We appreciate your time.
Definitely. All right, folks. We will talk to you next time.
Thanks for listening and supporting the Forged in the Fires podcast with Fireman Rob. Remember, don't forget to like and subscribe to this podcast. And please share this episode with a friend or family member. To find out more about Fireman Rob, or if you have a question, go to www.firemanrob.com. Until next time, Live your life forged in the fires.